Question number 8, Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and asks what measures, if any, have been put in place by which to assess the performance of the commissioners appointed to replace the elected Canterbury Regional Council.
Honourable Dr.
Speaker, key measures for government is improved water and resource management in Canterbury. Despite 19 years since the RMA was passed and over half the allocated hydro and irrigation water in New Zealand being in Canterbury, the previous elected council failed to provide an operative water plan. Good progress has been made with the commissioners notifying the decision on the Natural Resources Plan in October. I also note that ECAN had the worst record in 2008 for resource consent processing of 84 councils, with only 29% complying with statutory timeframes. I note that in the first quarter of this financial year, that has been improved to 95%. A further key measure in respect of water quality is compliance with resource consents. These have improved from 43% in 2009 to 59% in 2010. I also note the huge progress the commissioners have made in putting in place the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, with 5 zone committees having been set up.
Very good, very good. The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Does he agree with the decision of his government-appointed commissioners to sack the 7 staff involved in the Clean Heat project, which has improved Christchurch's air quality and assisted almost 19,000 homeowners to install cleaner heating and insulate their homes? And if so, how will their sacking and delaying the air quality standards keep pressure on councils such as ECAN to, and to quote the Minister's own words, improve air quality at the fastest practical rate, minimise harm and protect the public health of communities?
Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, the question the member has raised really does highlight the difference between the government and the opposition. And it's this. What will make a difference to air quality is installing more clean heats. And the interesting thing is, over 5 times as many new clean heat systems have been put in place in this government in 2 years in what that government did in 9. It's actually clean heat devices, not bureaucrats, that will clean up the air in Christchurch.
Colin King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary question to the Minister. Has the Minister received any further advice from Commissioners and the Huranui-Waiau Zone Committee on additional steps necessary to ensure an orderly and sustainable development of water resources in North Canterbury?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, yesterday I received a formal application from Commissioners to extend the moratorium on the Huranui River to include the adjacent Waiau catchment, and today, after consultation with Cabinet and Caucus, have approved this proposal. I would note that such a moratorium in Canterbury are only possible because of the Special Environment Canterbury legislation that was passed by this government and which is enabling a far more orderly approach to irrigation development in Canterbury. This moratorium will stop a first-in, first-served rush for the considerable water that is available on the Wairau and will enable the Huranui-Waiau Zone Committee set up under the Canterbury Water Management Strategy to develop a sensible and balanced water plan for North Canterbury.
The Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Is the Minister satisfied with the operation of ECAN in relation to the statement on the front page of the press that the sting operation that saw 28 buses immediately ordered off Christchurch roads last week was prompted by letters to the editor, and I quote, "If it wasn't for the letters to the editor, this would not have come to our attention," in light of the fact that ECAN has been receiving complaints from the public ever since the new tenders were let?
Mr Speaker, the government does have concerns about the recent performance of public bus services in Canterbury, particularly in respect of Christchurch bus services. I would note that the decisions over those contracts were made by the previous elected council and not the commissioners. I actually think the commissioners have played quite an important role in that they have enabled Go Buses in Hamilton to buy out Christchurch bus services, and I am hopeful that we will see an improvement in the quality of service as a consequence of that change. The issue of who manages bus service contracts in Canterbury was an issue that was highlighted in the investigation led by Wyatt Creech. It is the government's intention with Environment Canterbury's commissioners to do a wider review of what is the best way in which we can sensibly manage ongoing bus contract services in Canterbury.
Point of order, the Honourable Leandel.
Mr. Speaker, that question, the answer was interesting, but it wasn't the question I asked. The question I asked was who was being held accountable for the fact that the police did the investigation, did the sting operation as a result of letters to the editor, even though ECAN had been receiving complaints.
I must confess I found it difficult to understand exactly the member's question, because what she just told the House now doesn't seem totally consistent. She did mention the sting, but I don't remember about the police investigation in her original question, but I might be wrong there. What I'll do is I'll allow her to repeat her question, but if it contains politics, I will not ask the Minister to answer any further. The Honourable Leandel.
Is he aware that the police said that the sting operation that saw 28 buses immediately ordered off Christchurch roads last week was prompted by letters to the editor, and the quote on the front page of the paper was, "If it wasn't for the letters to the editor, this would not have come to our attention," in light of the fact that ECAN had been receiving complaints from the public ever since the new tenders were let?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a very important principle in this country that decisions by the police to prosecute are made by the police without influence by elected representatives. And if the member or others have concerns about the enforcement by police, I actually commend the police on their operation with respect to the buses, and I'm surprised that members opposite would be asking for either ECAN or ministers to be interfering in the independent prosecution decisions of the New Zealand Police.
Brendan Burns.
Has the Minister now seen the Prime Minister's comments from February in which John Key stated he wants to see new water schemes in place next year in Canterbury, and given he as Minister can't get new environmental controls in place in that time frame, doesn't that political agenda leave the ECAN commissioners up an increasingly dirty creek without a paddle?
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I'd point out that firstly, the compliance with resource consents under the commissioners has substantially improved. That's right. Substantially improved. And I thought members opposite would welcome that. Yeah. I'd also note that under the previous government, only 29% of resource consents were being processed on time, and that figure is now 95%. 95%, and wouldn't that be welcomed by members of this House?
Point of order, Brendan Burns.
Point of order. With respect, Mr. Speaker, my question was about what this will mean from here on, not the history.
Order. I listened very carefully this time, and the member talked about someone being up a dirty creek without a paddle, inject that kind of language into a question. The Minister's pretty much at liberty to answer how he sees fit. Question number 9, Colin King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister.